Another week of football means more information, and that means players are rising and falling in the rankings. The players that we're going to talk about today come straight from my rest of season rankings article. So it's kind of a blend between redraft and dynasty. But Jeff Bell and I, we handpicked a few guys that we want to talk about today that we have deemed risers and fallers. And Jeff, I think the first one we want to talk about, Sam Darnold is a riser. And this has been a low volume Seattle offense. There hasn't been a lot of passing, but Sam Darnold, hyper efficient. And it feels like it's only a matter of time before we see
Yeah,
that boom
and the
game.
reason why it's been low volume because that defense has been very, very good and putting Darnold in good situations. And I think that can be a catch-22 where maybe it holds you back from volume, but at the same time, that defense puts you in scoring opportunities. And so I think that Sam Darnold can maybe overcome some of that volume with the passing game. And Sam Darnold, he can run a little bit. And I mean, we saw a good game for Carson Wentz, and then we saw a bad game for Carson Wentz right after that. And so that might be, well, fantasy wise, it was okay. But if you actually watch the game, it was not very good for Carson Wentz. But that shows maybe that it was not the magic of Kevin O'Connell last year as much as Sam Darnold might be a pretty good quarterback.
And I mean, this guy was the number 2 overall pick for a reason. Like, yeah, he's been a punching bag since getting drafted. And we remember the prime time, seeing ghosts and missing time with Mono his rookie season. And he has very much so just been like a punching bag throughout his career. But like, you gotta remember through the first 15 weeks last year, this guy was like an MVP front runner. Like he looked unbelievable. And you and I, I remember like that What If We're Wrong episode, we kind of talked about like, yeah, like we think that Sam Darnold could turn back into a pumpkin, but like what if he just figured it out? And what if he's a good quarterback going forward? And I think that's what we've seen now. And like I think the big change is that like he's playing in rhythm. Like you see him like immediately hitting that last step in his drop back and just firing and like hitting guys in stride. But then every once in a while, you'll see where a play breaks down and he starts scrambling around and then he'll just like rip this ball. And you're like, oh yeah, that's the arm talent that made him a number 2 overall pick. What was that, 6-7 years ago now? I mean, it's been some time, but like still has just a cannon for an arm. And now it seems like he's starting to figure it out between the ears. So yeah, this is a guy who 2 years ago, I did a dynasty startup, a super flex dynasty startup, and I got him in round 18. And like, I don't know if I'll ever get a better value in a dynasty startup in my life because like now we're looking at this guy as a plug and play
Yeah,
high end
before the
QB2.
season, I was in a league with Colton, our good friend Colton Donald. What's
Yeah,
Colton's last? Dodson. Yes, that's
Dodson,
correct. I'm sorry, Colton. Colton, you're awesome.
Dodson.
So Colton and I are in a league together, and I needed a third quarterback on my roster. I have a very, very loaded team. I needed a kind of a plug-in running back and a third quarterback, and Colton is kind of rebuilding his team a little bit. I gave him 2 seconds. I won the league last year, so late seconds for Travis Etienne and Sam Darnold, and I'm liking that deal quite a bit
Ooh,
right now, and it's
sorry,
really
Colton.
helped me push forward. But that Clint Kubiak offense, there's been a lot of talk about the Colts being the Saints from last year and falling apart. And the thing with that Clint Kubiak offense is, well, Rashid Shaheed got hurt, Derek Carr couldn't hit the deep passes anymore, and Chris Olave got hurt as well. All the pieces fell apart there. But when you look at what the Saints now have, or not, the Seahawks now have with Clint Kubiak, with Sam Darnold coming in there, the emergence of Torrey Horton. We know Jackson Smith and Jigba is looking like a superstar. You've got Elijah Arroyo that started to come on at tight end, the tight end that can attack down the field. Cooper Kupp's been healthy and he knows that offense very, very well. So there's levels of comfort there. This is a really great system for Sam Darnold.
And AJ Barner as well, kind of getting like lost in the discussion. But this, like, we know these Kubiak offenses, they like running backs and tight ends. They can get downfield and get out in space, and they've got that in Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. They've got that in Arroyo and Barner. So we talked about this a lot this offseason, like trying to identify the offenses that everybody thinks are going to be bad, that if they're good, could end up really swinging a fantasy league. And we talked about Seattle consistently in that discussion. And of course, the big question mark was Sam Darnold. And we were saying, well, like, if Sam Darnold, like, If that doesn't work out, Jalen Milroe is kind of fun, but like we can throw that conversation to the side now. Like he is not going to lose this job. He looks very good in this offense, surrounded by good talent. The offensive line has really come together, and then a very good defense as well. And I think that's actually the issue in fantasy is the defense is so good that it kind of puts them in these positions where they haven't needed to throw the ball a ton. But like I said, it feels like it's only a matter of time before we see this big blow up game from Sam Darnold because all of the underlying metrics are telling us that it's there. Now, Jeff, you talked about this trade that you made 2 seconds for Sam Darnold and Travis Etienne. And wouldn't you know, funny enough, completely unplanned, Travis Etienne is the next riser that I want to talk about. And this, I mean, everybody is just waiting for him. Like, the NFL script writers, everybody thinks that they just copied and pasted from last year, and everything that happened in Tampa Bay is going to happen in Jacksonville, and Brashard Smith is going to steal Travis Etienne's job because Bucky Irving stole Rachaad White's job. Guess what, people? Travis Etienne is a much better running back than Rachaad White. We're talking about a first-round talent here, a guy who's got 3,700 scrimmage yards in his first 3 seasons. I mean, he is a very, very good running back, and I don't think that it's just this like matter of time before Brashard Smith takes over. I think Etienne has secured this job, and he is going to maintain this role as the RB1 in this offense for the rest of the year. And I think everybody else is just kind of overthinking this.
Travis Etienne, I think it's 394 yards he has, and it is the second most over 4 games by any Jaguars running back in franchise history, trailing only Leonard Fournette from, I believe it was the 2019 season that Leonard Fournette had a very good start to the season. So that tells you where Travis Etienne is coming from. But I think that as you talk about people expecting Tootin to take over, they're fundamentally losing the point of what is going on within this Jaguars team. And this is a 3-1 first place Jaguars team. The defense has been very good at forcing turnovers. The offense has struggled every single part of it outside of Travis Etienne. Like Travis Etienne has been the driving force of this offense. Like we understand with the Colts, we understand what's going on because it's Jonathan Taylor and it's Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones is riding the coattails of Jonathan Taylor, who we know is established as an elite
and Tyler
running
Warren
back.
and Josh Downs and Michael Pittman and the offensive line and Shane Steichen. Like there's a lot of pieces in Indianapolis, but yeah, Jacksonville, it's kind of
yes, exactly, because the passing game's an absolute mess. Trevor Lawrence, no,
Travis Hunter.
well, yeah, Travis, and there's so many because there's Trevor and Travis Etienne, and then there's Travis Hunter, and there's Trevor Lawrence, and it turns me upside down. But Trevor Lawrence has really struggled to take on Liam Cohen's offense, and we've seen Brian Thomas struggle. We've seen Travis Hunter kind of yo-yo back and forth of what's going on here. We've seen at times Brenton Strange or Parker Washington look like the primary option, but it all comes back to Travis Etienne being the steadying force there, and that's where you're lost if you think that Travis Etienne is going to lose the job to Bashal Tutin, because he is the reason for a 3-1 team's success. And I just don't really know the direction that people are pulling outside of wish casting or hope casting or looking at best ball exposure, or I use the 2nd-round pick on Bashal Tutin. There's no real reason to think that Travis Etienne, outside of an injury, is going to lose his job.
Yeah, I think it's that, Jeff. A lot of people got really excited because they had just written Travis Etienne off. Like, just assume that he was bad because he didn't accumulate a ton of yards last year. Like, he did have a down year last year. We can't bury the lead. Like, he did have 2 good years to start his career and then a little bit of a dip last year. But I think because of that, people just assumed that it was naturally going to happen and that there'd be this hot hand approach and that Bashal Tutin would have the hottest hand. But it's just not happening. And I think that we need to take those preseason priors that we had about this backfield, throw them out the window, and realize that Etienne has like very firmly.
It reminds me of the Panthers last year, and it's different, but it's similar, where everything was on Jonathan Brooks. Like, it's going to be Jonathan Brooks takeover season. Jonathan Brooks is going to be the guy. Meanwhile, Chuba Hubbard was just really good and really being a studying presence. And so I think that there's and I don't think it's wrong to have arrived at that mindset of Travis Etienne being in his last year. The Jaguars are going to get rid of him. They're going to go with the young running backs. But similar to how the Panthers were going to get rid of Chuba Hubbard and go with Jonathan Brooks, I mean, we might have a situation where Travis Etienne is just so good that they give him a contract extension, they keep him around, and he is the running back for the next couple of years, and Tutin is kind of a change of pace. So, I mean, anything is in play long term when you look at that, but right now, Travis Etienne's been one of the most productive running backs in the NFL.
So let's do a 2-for-1 here, talking about risers, Jeff. 2 first-round running backs that were drafted this year that were very disappointing through the first few weeks and then had their big blow-up games in week 4. Of course, I'm talking about Ashton, Jeanty, and Omarion Hampton. Like, how high are we willing to raise these guys now? I mean, in dynasty rankings, I can't really raise them that high. I had them right behind Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, so they kind of stay right there. But like, now that we have seen it, I guess I should ask, like, how high is the excitement? Like, are you willing to maybe try to trade down from your Bijan and your Gibbses and try to get some of these guys with a little bit on top, or do you think that we're going to continue to see some like up and down
I
tendencies
mean, I
throughout
don't
this year?
love tiering, like playing within those tiers at the top end. Just I feel like if I have Bijan Robinson, I'm just going to have Bijan Robinson on my team for a little while. But I hear you, and I think it's interesting. I think I'm pretty certain it was last week we were talking about how Omarion Hampton just kind of looked lost, or how he didn't look really good, and Najee Harris looked pretty good. And I said, well, when you look at, you can really see it in college. You can see it with blue chip freshman running backs that are running into the back of their offensive line, and everything's moving too fast. I said the adjustment will happen, and it will happen a lot sooner because it's already happened for them. And it turns out it happened the next week. And I think that they both figured some things out in terms, and everything feels a lot more comfortable now. And Omarion Hampton looked explosive against the Giants on several runs downfield. We got Ashton Jeanty back to the Michael Myers pose, and he was back to exactly everything we expected.
I'm sure that had everything to do with it, nothing to do with facing off against
You
the Bears'
know,
run defense.
yes, but also like I do feel like there was probably a level of him getting outside of his comfort zone of like, well, this is how they want me to do this.
Yeah.
And then like saying, no, this is how I do this. And I think that that's a key part
hmm
in just life and development in general, especially when you're a new job, new situation, trying to figure out like, how do they want me to do this? And then you have to figure out a way to, if you know how to get the job done, marrying your know-how on how to get the job done with what the expectations is. And like we can joke about like the pose and everything, but at the same time, like instead of that first thought being, oh yeah, I need to stand like this instead of like this, now the first thought is I'm reading the defense and I'm going to attack and we're going to do this. And so I do think that it's not nothing.
Which also, like, I want to say for a 5'8" guy, like he is a small running back. I think when you're asking him to crouch down in an athletic position, he can't get the same read on the defense. I think like part of him standing up is a function of like how he's able to read defenses. So I think that it's not just like, a funny thing that gets shared on social media, the Michael Myers pose, as everybody calls it. I think that it actually helps him see the defense. And now we've seen Jahmyr Gibbs pick that up from Ashton Jeanty, another shorter running back who now does that in the backfield as well. So yeah, kind of a funny change there. But I think the major takeaway here, Jeff, is just to exercise patience with these young guys, because we talked about it last year. Or last week, we had a very in-depth conversation about Omarion Hampton, and that's where it kind of opened up that conversation where I said, like, in the first 2 weeks he looked lost. In week 3, I started to see him put it together, where he seemed a little bit more patient and he was getting through his creases and doing those things, and like it was only a matter of time. And then with Ashton Jeanty, I remember saying, like, the Bears are up next. Like, that is a get right game for Ashton Jeanty. So I don't think anybody watching this show is reactive enough to have like sold low on Hampton or Jeanty or anything like that. But there might have been some more casual fantasy players out there who did. So this is just a quick reminder: stay patient with these rookies. Even the best ones can take some time to acclimate. Want to talk about one more? Oh,
On
go
that
ahead.
point too, talk is really cheap, and people will say things on social media and then in their
Mm,
actions in leagues don't back that up. And I think that you'll get people that will be very panicked on social media, and then you see them in a league. Like I know I'm the type of person that if I'm playing in a fantasy league with somebody and I see somebody freaking out about Omarion Hampton on Twitter, and I see that they have Omarion Hampton on in their dynasty league, I'm gonna see how freaked out are we about Omarion Hampton. The action never follows the talk, but the problem that you run into is that the consumers that see the panic. They don't see the side of I'm holding this
mhm.
because that's what I do, and they make the reactionary move, and they're the ones that get hurt. And so that's where you're exactly right on exercise some patience, have a filter, see what you're taking in, and recognize that what is being said out on social media is not being backed up by action in leagues.
Let's talk about one more young rookie running back who nowhere near the breakout. And I want to say there were a lot of other risers that I was planning to talk about today that we talked about on yesterday's episode. Xavier Worthy, Woody Marks, and some other guys. So if you haven't checked out yesterday's episode, be sure to do that. Lots of good information there. But a guy that we didn't talk about too much is Brashard Smith. And I know this is like super deep cut here. This is not a guy who blew up the way Omarion, Hampton, and Ashton Jeanty did. But again, trying to like get ahead of the curve here, ahead of the market a little bit. I see a guy who in week 1 didn't log a single touch. In week 2, 1 rushing attempt and 1 target. In week 3, 2 rushing attempts and 1 target. And last week we saw 4 rushing attempts and 4 targets. Now some of that did come in cleanup duty late in the game when they were up multiple scores, but this is a guy that we had really high expectations for around the draft season. We were talking about the comps to Jerick McKinnon and the ability to catch the ball and make plays out of the backfield. And, you remember, Jeff, like the first week of training camp, there was that report that came out where Brashard Smith was like, I've got a lot to learn here. Like, I'm still new to this position and there's a lot to pick up and a lot of assignments that I still haven't really figured out yet. And I don't think that he's like fully up to speed yet, but again, exercising patience. I find myself now kind of back in on the Brashard Smith hype train. And maybe I had deboarded at some point in training camp, but now seeing that he's starting to see that role grow a little bit, I'm starting to get a little bit excited about Brashard Smith again.
I hear you, and I understand, and a lot of it is, Kareem Hunt's not inspiring. Isaiah Pacheco's been a big disappointment, and so that opens up the opportunity. We went pretty deep on the Chiefs receivers on our usage episode that just came out the other day, and so part of that was plugging Xavier Worthy in, getting him reacclimated, utilizing Xavier Worthy. Along with that's going to be plugging Rashee Rice in and getting him up and running. And so for me, Brashard Smith is, if it happens, it's going to be the second half of the year that it would happen, where,
Surely.
because
Yeah.
as you're trying to get these wide receivers going and you recognize like this is the key of our offense here, these receivers, you're going to want all these pieces up and running, and you're going to keep the veteran running backs in there while you're figuring out and getting the comfortable with the receivers. And then you're probably going to want to have a period of, hey, we've liked Isaiah Pacheco, we've kept him here the last couple of years, or hey, we trust Kareem Hunt to make these reads. Let's see if having these receivers now opens up the defense a little bit more and they can be a little bit more effective before you go all the way to Brashard Smith. And it's been really back and forth on, there's just a couple things that give me trepidation on Brashard Smith. And one of them is that he kind of was filling in with the wide receivers because of all these injuries throughout the preseason and kind of working
Mhm.
with them and not really working in terms of like being on the first team, like kind of being like the fifth guy up with the wide receivers because we need a body over here type thing was going on there. The other thing is that traditionally Andy Reid has kind of leaned more towards the old school coach mentality of like a red shirt type of approach for a young player. I just think there's a lot of, I see the upside and I can't deny the upside. It's just that the league has to probably be deep enough to go there. I just think there might be more valuable pieces. It definitely does have the potential down the stretch to be a league winning type of a player.
You talk about that redshirt rookie season, and I think that was an old school Andy Reid mentality. But I think about Kareem Hunt's rookie season. I think about Rashee
She
Rice.
Rice
I
didn't
think
do
about
anything the
Xavier
first half of
Worthy.
his
I
rookie
mean, we
season,
have
and they needed.
the first half, but he was a wide receiver one over the second half. And I think that's just like what I'm getting at right now in your deep leagues. I'm picking Brashard Smith up and stashing him. I mean, Jeff, you talk about the second half of the season. We're 4 weeks away from the second half of the season. Like it
That's
moves quick. Like it's gonna be here soon. So I still think like picking Brashard Smith up, stashing him. I mean, he probably got dropped on some dynasty waiver or some dynasty leagues out there where you can pick him up for free right now. I'm not clamoring to get this guy in your lineup or saying he's a sleepy like a streamer or anything like that. I'm just saying that I want to get ahead of it now. Let's say Brashard Smith comes out this week and they do open the book up for him a little bit and he has 10 carries and 5 targets and then everybody's frantically bidding for him. I see that usage ticking up. And for me, we talk about it, like how sharp fantasy managers are nowadays. And I'm trying to find the guys that nobody else is talking about. And I haven't seen anybody else talking about Brashard Smith right now. So I'm rising him up my rankings. I'm picking him up in a handful of leagues and hoping that he could be that second half of the guy that we had hoped for when the Chiefs drafted him back in April. All right, Jeff. Let's talk about some fallers now. Second half of the show, the not so fun part, but a necessary part of what we do here. Let's start off with DeAndre Swift. This guy, very high hopes for coming into the season. Very little touch competition, and now we see everything starting to click. Caleb Williams looks good. Bears offense looks good. DeAndre Swift's getting touches, but the production just hasn't been there. So what are we supposed to do here?
Buy, to be honest, probably. I think that,
Yeah.
I go back to Warren Buffett sometimes in situations like this where it's when everybody's running scared, that's when you buy. And when everybody's really confident, that's when you sell. I think that Swift, I mean, they're putting a new offense in. Ben Johnson's putting his stamp on this team. It's an offense that Swift does know, but it's an offense that his teammates don't necessarily know. And so that's part of it. The other part of it is, we can talk about Bashal Tootin and we can talk about Brashard Smith. I know you're a Kyle Monangai guy, but like when it comes to pop juice explosion, Kyle Monangai is not very full of that, and neither is Roshan Johnson. So at some level, like I would be there on Panic Island with Swift if there were literally anything that gets me excited about the other options. And it's kind of almost the same conversation as Chase Brown, maybe a little bit in Cincinnati, where it's like, if there was really something there pushing them out of position, sure. But at the same time, like we know that for the most part, DeAndre Swift is a starting NFL running back. He might be the 32nd best running back, but for the most part, he's a starting NFL running back. We don't know that any of the other pieces on the Bears offense are starting NFL running backs at this point. And so if everybody's going to panic because they want to get out while they think they still can get out on DeAndre Swift, I mean, the usage is definitely there. And Swift had a window last year, and it was almost this exact same time of year where everybody was panicking and trying to get out on Swift. And then he just started ripping off like 80 to 100 scrimmage yard games. And he was like a top five-ish running back for a solid month. I think it's very much in play for Swift to have that. And when you look at the landscape about where if you missed Woody Marks, and injuries always happen, you missed Trey Benson or something like that, and you're really struggling at running back, you missed Javonte Williams. I mean, DeAndre Swift might be a really, really cheap entry point for you to plug in that running back 2, or even if you're really scrambling, that running back 1 that's just losing you every single week, recognizing the upside is there.
And I think that's it. And that's why I wanted to talk about DeAndre Swift, because he is a faller in my rankings. But I agree that he is also a buy. And it's just like the nature of having to do this project every single week is so hard, because when players are moving up the rankings, it's great, but then there are naturally going to be fallers as well. So like DeAndre Swift, like I don't think I've seen anything that has made me say like, oh, I really need to push DeAndre Swift down the rankings. Yeah, his touchdown luck hasn't been great, and he hasn't really had any breakaway runs yet, but the touches are there. Like he is 16th in the league in expected fantasy points. Like he's still getting a lot of opportunities on a good offense. As you mentioned, there's nobody else that's really breathing on his neck, like trying to take the job from him. But it's just the nature of having to do this project every single week. Quinshon Judkins is moving up. Javonte Williams is moving up. Ken Walker, Travis Etienne. And when those guys are moving up, they jump ahead of DeAndre Swift and naturally push him down. I'm not panicking about DeAndre Swift, but I think a lot of people are. And I'm completely with you that I think that right now is the perfect time to buy him. I haven't seen anything that's really changed how I felt in the preseason. Like he is getting all of the work on an offense that is much better than we expected, and a bad defense that is forcing them to be in situations where they have to push the ball down the field late in the game. I mean, it seems like we're on the precipice of a DeAndre Swift breakout, and I can't keep him firmly in my rankings just because we haven't seen that ceiling yet. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that we haven't seen it through the first quarter.
I think
of the
there's
season.
so much interesting philosophy around buy and sell content and buy and sell just in general, because I think that what we tend to see when it comes to content and buy and sell space is buys are the exciting young players that I'm really excited for them, and like, but you're probably buying at 125% of that, and sells are this guy's been horrible for 3 weeks. Oh my God, what are we gonna do? Sell, sell, sell. But you're probably
Or this guy's old. Everybody's
you're
selling. He's
selling at
old. He can't keep up the
65% of the
pace.
value there. Whereas, like, if you really wanted to play it right, like, you buys, you should be trying to buy at like 70% of the value, and sells, you should be trying to sell at not the glaring obvious 120% of like I am so tired of these dynasty leagues where every single time a Trey Tucker or somebody does something, they go on the trade block immediately. I have never once I've been playing dynasty in years seen somebody pay 150% for Trey Tucker, knowing that they're paying 150. So stop it. I am so done with these. You put people on the trade block because they scored 2 touchdowns out of nowhere, and inevitably my sleeper app blows up with 6 different leagues putting somebody random on the trade block. Nobody's paying 125% for Romeo Doubs because he had 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys defense on Sunday Night Football. I digress. But buys should make you feel really gross when you're buying them. Like, you should feel really uncomfortable because that person that's selling it is feeling really uncomfortable on having them on your roster, and you're taking on that risk. And that to me is really a buy. But when you're making content that says that, that's what gets roasted on YouTube or everybody saying, I can't believe they're calling DeAndre Swift a buy. Oh my God, these guys are idiots. Everybody's selling him. And that's the reason why he's a buy.
Yeah, I think like Javonte Williams is the perfect example where
Yeah.
people saw that workload in week 1 and they were like, "Yeah, but it's Javonte Williams. Like, don't buy Javonte Williams. Sell your Javonte Williams now because Jaden Blue is coming back and Miles Sanders is going to carve out a role." And like the reality is, like, if you bought Javonte Williams after week 1, that was probably one of the best buys out there. But there wasn't a single person out there recommending to buy. Everybody was saying sell because it's Javonte Williams and he's going
I
to
feel
turn
like if
into a
you were to
pumpkin and this is a
read
primetime
an
game.
article that Jeff Bell writes every week.
Oh, all right, all right. Yeah, I mean, and that's it. Like, I think you're onto something that like it shouldn't feel good buying these players, but I think DeAndre Swift's one of those guys right now that like I will go out and buy because the opportunity's been there and there's no danger of him losing his job. Let's talk about another faller here, Jeff, and this is the Dynasty show, so we're going to have to talk about the Dynasty impact for Jamar Chase, who right now, I mean, it's weird atop the Dynasty rankings right now. Malik Neighbors with an ACL injury, CeeDee Lamb on, well, not on IR, but expected to miss some time. Justin Jefferson, you know, whether it's been JJ McCarthy or Carson Wentz, just hasn't been putting up Justin Jefferson type numbers. And now we've got Jamar Chase, like very much so, just struggling with Jake Browning. And I tried to look at the context behind that 2023 struggles, and sure, there was some context there with the injuries and whatnot, but I think the missing piece to that puzzle when I was looking back at that is that NFL teams have had a year and a half to study that tape from 2023 with Jake Browning, and now they are just shutting this offense down with ease. I mean, when we're doing these weekly rankings, which you and I both do, Jeff, like, where do you have Jamar Chase this week? Because I've got him at like wide receiver 8, like just based on what we've seen. I want to check to make sure. Yeah, I've got him at wide receiver 8, like in the same range as Devontae Adams and Emeka Ibuka, and that is not where we expected to be ranking Jamar Chase.
To
5
find
weeks
out
into
where
the
Jeff
season.
has Jamar Chase, make sure to check out our Friday show where we go through every single matchup because Jeff does not have his rankings in yet on Tuesday evening at this point in time.
But you'll probably have him about there, right? Like, you're not just putting Jamar Chase atop
Not
the
anymore,
receiver
no.
rankings anymore, is what I'm
It's
getting at.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's to some extent, I don't know that there could have been 2 worse matchups for Jake Browning the last 2 weeks, going up against the Vikings,
Yeah.
going up against the Broncos on the road on Monday Night Football. Because we did see the Bengals go up and down the field on the Jaguars when Browning came in, and they did win that game. So, and I believe Jamar Chase had a pretty good game in that game, and I think some of that came with Jake Browning at quarterback. So,
Yeah, he was just force feeding him in the
which he
second
should
half.
be
Yeah.
just force feeding him, period, because he got to figure something out.
Right.
It's who you're playing against. I think is a big part of it. And the Vikings with Flores having a week to prepare for Jake Browning, I mean, that's a tough spot. And then you go on the road to Denver again. Denver, we expected them to be, they were the number 1 defense in a lot of fantasy rankings before the season. They started a little bit slower, but they definitely looked the part on Monday night. And so there'll be better matchups for Jamar Chase for Jake Browning.
Not this week. I mean, I'm not crazy about
No,
Detroit this week. Like, this
yeah,
could be tough
probably would
sledding
be tough
again.
sledding again. But yeah, it's what do you do in Dynasty? Because this is and what do the Bengals do? Because the Bengals have Super Bowl expectations, and unless they think that that Joe Burrow's his season is just done, they can't keep putting Browning out there the way that this is looking. So at some level of whether it's my change.org petition to get Jameis Winston to the Cincinnati Bengals to save the fantasy prospects for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, or if it's, the icky solution is potentially Russell Wilson, or the interesting solution that probably couldn't happen is Kirk Cousins. At some level, you've got to recognize that we've built our team around, like, they know they have fundamental holes in their team. They have fundamental holes in their offensive line, fundamental holes in their defense. They built their team around having a quarterback good enough to overcome that. I mean, it's just like if this is just a redshirt year, if you're just throwing the towel in on this year of Joe Burrow's done, don't play Jamar Chase either. I mean, don't risk a serious injury to Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
And if you are thinking that, just keep us afloat because we do think that Joe Burrow is going to be back in week 13 or whatever it is and keep us in the hunt, I don't see how you think Jake Browning can do that at this point in time.
Let's talk about another faller here, Jeff. Travis Hunter. This is another really tough dynasty discussion because, like, you don't want to overreact 4 weeks into the season, but the reality is that he's just looked better on defense than he has on offense. And that's not to say he hasn't looked good on offense. Like, I'm sure you saw the somebody did a cut up of him blocking. Like, he's looked great blocking in the run game. Doesn't matter for fantasy. He had this unbelievable Spider-Man like catch, 28 yards across the middle of the field where he looked unbelievable. The ball skills that we know he has were on display, but we're just not seeing it all that often. So, there was hope that, like, even in a limited role, Travis Hunter would still be able to produce. But I think that they're still trying to figure out what is what in Jacksonville. I think Liam Cohen is still kind of playing with all these pieces, trying to figure out who is going to be best in what role. And I do worry about where Travis Hunter fits in here.
Part of me, I want to see Brian Thomas be Brian Thomas before I'm going to worry at all about Travis Hunter being Travis Hunter at some level, because if you can't even get your top guy going and get that up and running, and but at the same time, like, they're 3-1, they're in first place. I don't know. It's a really tough conversation. We talked about Travis Etienne. We talked about the struggles of this Jacksonville offense when we talked about Travis Etienne and him being the focal point here. I had Travis Hunter clearly behind Tedero McMillan in my rookie ranks. And I said it, I can see Tedero McMillan being schemed and built to be the number one option in his offense. If you are going to be moonlighting or playing Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball, I understand where he can be a productive player. There were some extremes that, like, couldn't even believe that. I understand where he could be a productive player. The idea that he was going to be the number one option was not on the table for me. Where I was wrong, where everybody was wrong, was not having Emeka Egbuka above Travis Hunter. But Travis Hunter, his stock in rookie drafts was really weird because the start,
Second, third, fourth in
but
most
where
drafts. Yeah.
at the very start, he was the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. He was like
Oh, he was
12th. Like, people were not touching him at all. And then he jumped up to the 102. And I don't really know what happened to spur that jumping up, because we knew he was going to go early in the draft. We knew whoever drafted him was going to play him on both sides of the ball. Like, those were known things, but I don't know if it was like landing in Jacksonville and as proxy the Chris Godwin role, which I think could still happen for Travis Hunter.
I think that was it. That's where my head was for sure. Like, I just imagine Travis Hunter just like boop right into that slot role, doing exactly what Chris Godwin did last year, where he was the number 2 wide
but
receiver.
and we've talked previously about when you look at Travis Hunter, and I know he played more offensive snaps than defensive snaps this past week, but if you want to get him successful, defense is going to be the better path to get him playing successfully, and then plugging him into the offense and being very intentional with the usage of when he's in the game. Give him the ball, and he can play 8 snaps on offense. If he gets 8 targets, he's still very, very fantasy relevant. But I think right now it's more holistically with Jacksonville is the problem than actually Travis Hunter being the problem. It's figuring out the passing offense and whether or not Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy that can figure out that passing offense.
Let's talk about one more faller, Jeff, and this is another highly drafted rookie that we're starting to have some concerns about. Colston Loveland just can't get on the field. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like Cole Kmet right now is just a better tight end. I wouldn't say a better, but a more well-rounded tight end. He can do the tight end things. And I did have some concerns with Colston Loveland that he is like a thinner guy. I thought that he needed to, thicken out that frame a little bit, put on some weight to really play at the NFL level. Had some concerns about him missing the start of training camp, missing OTAs as he was recovering from shoulder surgery. But once he was like back like 5 or 6 days into training camp, I was like, I'm not worried about this anymore. He's going to be good. And he was just littering the timeline with highlight catches almost every single day in camp. I started to get a little bit more excited, started buying into it a little bit. But right now what we're seeing is that like he is just a very small time player, getting out there for 20-30% of the snaps. Cole Kmet is the clear tight end one here. So what is this? Is this something that like fantasy, or I should say dynasty managers should just like exercise some patience and hope that in year 2 he can break out and be that player that we hoped he'd be? Or is this maybe something that we start putting a little bit of weight into when a highly drafted rookie can't
Reminds
get on the
me
field?
of Trey McBride, to be honest, where Trey McBride sitting there. I think the skill set's very, very similar. I think that it's like we see the immediate success for Brock Bowers, but Brock Bowers is being treated different than a normal tight end, and he's being schemed to differently than a normal tight end. Or we see Tyler Warren, the immediate success there, and Tyler Warren's like the absolute freak athlete, like just kind of a completely different player. And really a lot of it is the Colts need Tyler Warren to do the things that Tyler Warren is doing right now. I don't know if the Bears think at this point in time they need Colston Loveland. And I think that Luther Burden's part of this conversation too, because Roma Dunze's looked so good. Roma Dunze's looked like the clear number one target there, which you drafted him top 10 last year to be that clear target. You're getting everything that you thought you were drafting in the top 10 there with Roma Dunze. They haven't really gotten DJ Moore up and running, or if they are even intend to get DJ Moore up and running. And Olamide Zaccheaus is the veteran that's in there. Cole Kmet's the veteran that's in there. And so it's looking at, like, do they feel like they need to get Colston Loveland going and Luther Burden going, or do they feel like they are getting into a good spot, comfortable here? Let's lean on the veterans. Let's get everybody comfortable in the offense. At some point in time, sure, we'll want to get them more involved and longer term, but maybe this is a redshirt year for those guys, and recognizing Cole Kmet's a starting NFL tight end. We're fine having the snaps go to Cole Kmet, or DJ Moore's here for right now. He's a starting NFL receiver. We're fine having those snaps go to him instead of Luther Burden. Meanwhile, we've got Roma Dunze ascending. Caleb Williams is starting to look very comfortable. We don't want to shake it up for Caleb Williams if he's feeling very comfortable. And that's the other part of the conversation. Right. On every single thing that the Bears are doing this year is to make Caleb Williams successful. That is your only mission for the Chicago Bears this year, is to have Caleb Williams be successful as the franchise quarterback. And it's trucks and trailers. It's always trucks and trailers with young quarterbacks, because at some point in time, with young quarterbacks, you need them to be the trailer. You need to pull them along. You need the offensive scheme there. You need the veterans. You need everything that can pull that young quarterback along and make him successful. At some point in time, that young quarterback flips, and he is the reason why everybody is successful. You get the Josh Allens and the Patrick Mahomes, and they are the driving points of their offense, the reason why everything is working. And that's, in order to get them to there, you need to have a baseline. You need to have them up and running. And I think Jared Goff's an interesting thought on there, because he's the ultimate trailer with Sean McVay, like basically telling him exactly what to do. But at some level, and now we see with Ben Johnson gone, Jared Goff is a truck. Like, Jared Goff is pulling the Lions offense. And so there's just,
And it goes back to the Sam Darnold conversation we just had earlier, that like he was getting pulled by Kevin O'Connell last year. Now he's the one doing the pulling in Seattle. And I do want to mention too, like Colston Loveland dealing with an injury right now, so he was unable to play last week. Do you think that like potentially now with the Bears in week 5 having this bye. I mean, if they come out after the bye in week 6, and it sounds like Colston Loveland, it wasn't a serious injury. It sounds like they're just erring on the side of caution here. But I think my major concern is that like the Bears do have things that they really need to focus on right now. And that is installing a new offense. That's getting Caleb Williams up to speed. That's continuing to foster this growth that they're seeing with Roma Dunze. You talk about a redshirt year, and I almost wonder if that's just kind of what we're heading towards now, especially with, allowing him to nurse this injury a little bit more than I think people expected him to, is that they're just going to say like, hey, let's just push this off to 2026. Like we've got long-term plans for this whole offense. And they just kind of focus on Caleb right now more than they focus on the other pieces. And I guess that's just what has me concerned. Like I just don't see a path where Colston Loveland comes in and takes the job from Cole Kmet and then, is still dealing with DJ Moore and Roma Dunze and Olamide Zaccheaus and Luther Burden and Cole Kmet and all these other guys that are getting targets as well. I just think we're kind of at the point now where if you have Colston Loveland, you just take it on the chin for the rest of this year, maybe try to buy low after this offseason. But I'd be pretty shocked if Colston Loveland finds a
Well,
path.
I think we know what Ben Johnson's reaction is if somebody suggests his offense is struggling right now. We kind of got that at halftime this past week. But I think like holistically, I think the Bears look at themselves as a team that thinks we should be 3-1 right now. We let that game against Minnesota get away from us. Things are going very well right now. We should be 3-1. We're not feeling like we need to, like, it's not a panic button to get Colston Loveland going. It's not a panic button to get Luther Burden going. I think the Falcons are an interesting conversation.
They're feeling themselves. After 2 straight wins, the
Falcons are an interesting conversation because we had that train wreck game against Carolina right off of a game where they just ran the ball down the Vikings' throats, and then they fired Ike Hilliard. They moved the offensive Zach Robinson down to the sideline. And what did they do immediately after that? They fed Drake London. They fed Kyle Pitts. They fed Bijan Robinson. They said, we probably were overthinking some things, probably got ahead of ourselves a little bit with the way that we played against Minnesota going into this Carolina game. Carolina caught us. We're really embarrassed by that. But how do we get things right? How do we develop Michael Penix? We lean on Drake London. We treat Drake London like the player that we've been treating him through the entire preseason. But the Bears are the opposite end of that spectrum. They're not panicked right now. They're not saying like, everything's on fire. We have to get DJ Moore going. They're feeling like what they're doing is the right thing.
Yeah. Well, on that note, that'll end the risers and fallers coming out of week 4. Jeff and I will be back Friday morning as we talk about every matchup in week 5. We finally got some bye weeks here, so these episodes should be a little bit more bite-sized than the previous weeks have been. But I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. As I say all the time, the show wouldn't be possible without you taking the time to listen, so thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on Friday.